A misogynist, a cult leader, the pinnacle of masculinity, or an actual god. These are the labels which have been put on social media star Andrew Tate. So who actually is he? How has he gained so much public attention? And why is his influence on young men especially deemed so dangerous? Hi, I'm Jossie Evans. I'm from the social team here at ITV News, and I'm joined for this episode by my colleague Sam Leader. We've both been reporting across all our social platforms on Andrew Tate and his influence. And so we're here to bring you up to speed on why he's gained so much attention and sparked so much concern. But first, Sam, let's start by explaining the obvious. Who exactly is Andrew Tate?
He's a former kickboxer, turned influencer, really. I mean, he was a good kickboxer and then suddenly kind of blew up. He's become known as this kind of businessman who ended up kind of giving business advice, but then I guess it crossed over into this masculinity world, and it was kind of how to be a man and a lot of kind of inflammatory comments, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, he's a self-proclaimed misogynist. I don't think we're saying anything new there. And he really came into the public eye back in 2016. He was on Big Brother.
And I think the stuff he says obviously makes him very shareable. You know, it's very always against women. You know, he's made comments about women cooking dinner whilst men are at work. He's made comments about if his woman, quotes, was doing OnlyFans, that he'd want to take a cut of that money. You know, it's very like inflammatory stuff that I think people then share, whether they agree with it or whether they think it's completely left field.
Women, let's cut to the chase here. Women should clean up. Not only should women clean up, women should clean up unprompted.
I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with women doing OnlyFans, as long as I had influence and control over it.
Only an English or an American girl is stupid enough to be a hoe for free. Because over here, they'll be a hoe because they were drunk. They'll just be a hoe because they're dumb. Oh, I slept with a bunch of men. Oh, he was funny.
I think the fact that he had this army of people that would share his content, you know, his followers would share, and that was part of his kind of thing, was that, you know, you share this and it gets the word out there. I think that made him explode into kind of this was all over TikTok, all over Instagram.
He's been living in Romania for a few years. I'm just going to play you this clip as to his reasons for moving to Romania.
People say, why do you live in Romania? And I explain my 5 reasons. One of them is the Me Too era. They go, oh, well, you're a rapist. I say, no, I'm not a rapist. But I like the idea of being able to just say to do what I want. I like being free. And if you're a man living in England or Germany or America or any of the Western world right now, you've decided to live in a country where any woman, any ex, any works at Greg's who you bought a pasty from, at some point in the future can destroy your life. This Me Too era has not protected women. It's just destroyed the safety of men.
So that video came out around 2017. It's now been deleted off his social media channels, but it's available online and easy enough to find off those main channels. Sam, explain to listeners why, despite social platforms cracking down on Tate, why he's gained so much attention recently.
So we kind of not heard from him for a while. I think you could argue that he'd gone away. His influence was obviously still there, but you weren't seeing the videos as much as you were before that, before it was constant. Suddenly the man appears again and he's in Romania, and he was arrested on suspicion of human trafficking, rape, and forming an organised crime group to exploit women, him and his brother, and I think it was 2 accomplices.
They obviously deny any involvement in this. Police are still holding them whilst the investigation continues. So he's in the top 10 most Googled people last year. It's clear that he has a substantial following and a loyal following. When does that following become sinister? There's all sorts of social media stars. Why is this more concerning? Why are people concerned about it?
I think at the time there was a lot of rumours that his following was becoming cult-like. People were claiming that this could slip over into a cult. And, you know, you can see it because it's a very secretive club. And I think if you touch on, or if we start with Hustlers University, which is it's a paid programme, and what he teaches is kind of earning money and being successful. And it seems harmless, I guess, to begin with, but when you dig a bit deeper, it gets a bit weird and a bit, as you said, sinister. There's this kind of exclusive club within that called The War Room, and literally the way they advertise it is strong and vibrant community of men aged 18 to 85 who are unwaveringly dedicated to the pursuit of excellence in all areas of life. So it's like this greatest, they say it's this greatest global network on earth. And you can already see the like links to, you know, this is a club. You can see how this could be appealing to someone that's maybe a bit lost, or teenagers, you know, kids who are looking for something to feel a part of. And as you kind of look through and you kind of look at the definition of a cult, you know, it's the devotion to a person or an object. And a lot of his videos will say, you're all losers and I'm the king. And it's kind of like he's putting himself above these people. And that's kind of where people can compare it to a cult. But just before he kind of got deplatformed and he went away for a while, I did have a conversation with someone called Alexandra Stein, who's a social psychologist, and she specialises in cults. And I think it's really interesting. The first time we went through his website, it was just red flag after red flag. I mean, I can play you some clips, but I reached out again and we went over the website again, and this was kind of her first response, basically.
Oh, yes, this is wonderful. Oh, dear, oh, dear. Sorry, I'm just gobsmacked when I'm looking at this again.
That was like the first thing she said. You know, she was back in the moment when we spoke about it in October.
Yeah.
But what really stood out on this website was this thing called the Tales of Wudan. And it features on his Cobra Tate website, so his main kind of platform. And me and Alexandra went through them, and I think her response kind of explains quite a lot of what she saw in it.
He's trying to really make himself into a kind of guru. But the first thing that I noticed in terms of what I know about cults is it's kind of building his own mythology about himself. And all cult leaders have this kind of made up story about who they are and where and when they discovered the great wisdom that they're about to share with you, usually for a price.
So if you look at that objectively, would you say that kind of is similar to what Andrew Tate is doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, she's describing someone who's built this cult of personality and is trying to legitimize themselves as the leader of followers.
Yeah, and it was just, as we went down this magazine, like it just kept, or this cartoon, it just kept coming up, and she went on to say this.
When you read down, it's just these really awful messages. If you don't struggle and suffer, you're either dead or invisible. You must, if you want people to care who you are, become familiar with pain. If you're not an exceptional man, you're a nobody. The danger in it, and I would say this about any kind of ideology, is this either or thing. Either you are going to be strong and powerful and exceptional and suffer and have pain, or you are a nobody. That's the warning sign that I, as a cult scholar, see.
I think what's scary is if you're thinking like 12, 13-year-old boys, the first thing you see on his main page is this quote.
And I teach the deserving the secrets to modern wealth creation. It's the deserving. So are you going to be part of the elite that can come into my world and I will privilege you with this information? And then the secrets. Now, all cults have secrets, and that's just a sales pitch at this stage. The secrets get more dark later on as one gets further into these organizations.
I think what's interesting about all of it is when you think of a cult, you don't think of a cult following through the internet. Do you know what I mean? But Alexandra basically said it would be surprising if he didn't have a cult-like following.
What I would say is, in a cult, you're isolating people. That does not have to be physically. You're isolating them, I refer to it as socially and psychologically. So if you're, let's say, a young man who spends your entire time watching Andrew Tate videos, so you're not doing anything else, so you're socially isolated, you're only texting with other adherents of the Andrew Tate ideology, and you're not getting any other information from anywhere. So you're socially and psychologically isolated.
I think it's hard to obviously argue that, you know, we don't know if it's a cult, but I think a lot of the stuff that we were seeing when we went through this website was that language that is quite controlling, is quite othering, and is quite, you know, I'm above you, I can give you this, you know, I can give you success, you know, you're going to struggle, but this is what I can give you.
Listening to that, she seems to be pointing to a community of men who feel isolated, who are being told that they're either weak or they're successful, there's no in between. A lot of it is screaming to me incel culture. Incel means involuntarily celibate. Is that something Tate is tipping into? Is that something he's encouraging his followers to join or to be?
I think we've discussed before that it's kind of hard to say. He's never acknowledged any of that. You know, you can't say that that Tate or his followers are incels. But I think some of the language, again, he uses, men are basically invisible, most men don't even exist, they send 10,000 DMs, don't even get read, let alone replied to. Like, that's not incel culture, but that is feeding into, you can see how a young man would be thinking, well, you know, what's the point?
I think crucially as well, it's important for us to flag, though young men are being targeted here and are potentially the victims of what is a cult or what is a scheme, it is also inherently anti-women. It's anti-woman, it's misogynist, it's victim blaming. You know, they are also culprits in this whole conversation. Let's talk about how we approach this subject with young men and with boys.
So you spoke to teachers, right?
Yeah, I've spoken to a couple of teachers, I've spoken to some students. The message from teachers is it's really ad hoc as to whether they're having guidance or not. So Andrew Tate as a subject is coming up, predominantly with young female teachers. Some of the people I spoke to said they've spoken to colleagues and the male teachers haven't been approached. It hasn't come up in their classes, and I think there's a reason for that.
There's a reason that people are approaching female teachers, you think?
Yeah, because I think if you're consuming this Tate content, you're already making a judgment as to who you feel comfortable approaching based on your level of respect for them or how you place them compared to you in a hierarchy. And if you've got a 20-odd-year-old female teacher at the front of the class, I think a 15-year-old boy is going to feel more empowered to bring up this controversial subject with them rather than a male teacher or a middle-aged male teacher, like regardless of the age, I think. And that has repercussions in class. You know, some of the people I've spoken to said that they're repeating a lot of his messaging, that it makes the teaching environment obviously not very pleasant because you're limited as a teacher as to how much of your opinion you can give. One teacher said, a year 9 boy said, oh, Andrew Tate, he loves women, he's got loads of money, he drives fancy cars. So even if
So scary though.
Scary, because the darker side of the messaging is there, but doesn't seem to be clicking with teenage boys just yet. But if you're keeping hold of sort of holding him as this pinnacle of masculinity, then it's only so long before the rest of what he's saying seeps in.
I think what's interesting is, where does the responsibility lie? Is that emphasis on schools now, or is that the emphasis on parents? I guess a bit of both.
I think a bit of both, and I think there's a gap. Let me play you this. This man is called BJ Malunga. He's a exec director at Student View. They go around teaching students how to challenge what they read online, and he's basically filling that gap that we've just identified.
I think Andrew Tate is the new tip of the iceberg. There's so many content creators out there, way more than people even know. Like every day I find content creators who have millions of followers who I've never come across. The actual bigger problem is the lack of media literacy in the UK. It's not part of the national curriculum yet. It's kind of just shoehorned in PSHE, it's shoehorned in citizenship, and it's something that gets sprinkled across curriculum rather than something that we leave school with.
He's saying that Andrew Tate is indicative of a wider lack of media literacy across the UK.
I just think it is scary that it's hitting an age group where you're very much developing and you can feel quite lost at that age and you can feel like you want to cling on to something.
So, Sam, these young people are savvy, but what advice would you give to them for how to use these platforms safely?
I think, again, it's not taking everything at face value and knowing that not everyone's going to have your best intentions at heart. This could be something that's going to benefit them and not you. And I think, just having those conversations about, not everything is as it seems, and you need to really think before you share stuff and react with stuff and get involved with stuff before you could get in too deep.